morning, good evening, good afternoon for everybody. My name is Tatiana Koval, and this is podcast Happy at Work. Usually in a podcast, I meet with experts from absolutely different countries. Today we discuss a very important topic, what to employ brand. It's not about recruitment. It's not only about communication, but it's about retention of people and working inside the organization and how it's important to engage your leaders and how it's important to focus on this touch point as a leaders who work with employees inside the organization. It's really important we discuss an interesting topic about differentiations. It's not about findings from the research. It's about creation, which you could do inside the organization and how you could you tell your stories and which stories you decided to tell inside and outside the organization. Today, my guest is Raz Mitzna, the best employer branding expert and the also leader of employer branding community. But I hope you could tell a little bit more about you for my audience who could follow you after our conversation on LinkedIn at least.
For sure. So, thank you for inviting me to your show. It's very nice to be here. I always like to talk about employer brands. So, as you said, my name is Raz, and I've been in the employer brand domain for the last 11 years. I have my own agency, which we help companies to develop their employer brand. And when I say to live and celebrate the company they are, right, inside and out, with a small team of experts from organizational development, HR, and of course the creative side and designers. We help companies attract and retain using marketing knowledge and skills. So that's my experience, and I hope to share as much as I can with you on this show.
Yes, we decided to discuss today a very interesting topic about how to implement your EVP in all touch points, in all candidate and employee experience. And firstly, my first question for you, what could you recommend to companies who really start to implement new EVP or maybe just recreated EVP in their process, in the process, in their communications and so on, they should focus on?
Sure. So, of course, the first questions we have to ask ourselves, what is the goal? Who is the target audience? Are we looking more to the inside on the outside? Now, I can share with you, Tatiana, that on my journey, it has shifted a lot. Employer brand was conceived and considered something that you use externally. But I think that these days, employer brand, everybody knows it starts from the inside. So I kind of answered the question that most of the times the target audience will be employees. And after doing that, once we have our EVP, which is what we offer, right? What is the deal? Why should employees come to work for us? You know, we have an important mission, we are growing, it's a very flexible environment, etc. Many offerings, right? The next thing we should do is think in two main efforts. First is the organizational efforts, the things that we control, the communication, the events, the media, right? This is something that organization can decide what to do and where. And the other main effort is through managers and employees. So because they actually own most of the employee experience. Employee experience happens, on a Tuesday on 3 p.m. when someone wants to go home and there's a client calling. There it happens. And how the manager reacts and what can he do? Does he help or does he not? Does he make time or does he not? It doesn't mean that he have to let the employee go. That's, work is work. But how he performs is the employer brand, So what we do, we look in these two efforts, the organizational effort and the managerial effort, and we map the most significant touch points we want to intervene. Because, sometimes you have this fantasy that once you know what you want to say, people come for us because they can develop themselves. Okay, we're going to implement it. And the truth for professionals like ourselves, we know that you cannot implement it at once at every touch point. So we decide where to do. And that's When you do the research for the EVP research, why do you come to work here? How do you tell your friends? And what are you proud of, etc.? That's great. Another big part of the discovery phase is to understand where do you learn about the company? What happened that made you believe that you can apply for a job in within the company? Because in those moments is the key to influence them in the next time. Because as a general way of thinking about it, we are like moments architecture. We need to architect the moments, so most of them, most of the time, will have our narratives, our offerings for employees. So that's the general offer. Map the organization and touch point, and then sit with managers and understand how their day during the day they have interactions with employees.
Absolutely agree with you. And I know what sometimes it's usually we don't have big problems with mapping, but sometimes they have. But also we have some problems to implement in some touch points. And my next questions for you is I want to back to a leadership role, but I also want to ask you about which type of touch points from your experience is much more important and much more difficult from a perspective of implementation, your EVP.
Sure. So I would begin that the most difficult ones are with the managers because you don't control what they say. I have another thing that I learned along the way. You don't control what people say, you can influence. And it's the same thing with managers. You cannot control what they will have in the one-on-one session, in their team sessions. And you know what? That's good thing because you don't want to be all day with managers, right? So this is the most difficult. And I think that everyone that operates an ambassador program it will resonate with them because ambassador program, I think it's the most advanced utilization of employer brand because you're not doing it yourself. So the most difficult is managers, and afterwards we can share how can you train managers, how you can work with managers in order to speak about the things that make this company a good company to work for. Uh, Another difficulty is once you have an EVP and you want to start to put the story out there on the media, on your career site, on the social media, suddenly managers in the organization pay attention to what HR, employer brand professionals are doing. Because before that, it was mostly in closed rooms and have everyone has something to say. And HR as professionals, they know a lot about relationships and processes and implementations, but sometimes it's very hard to sustain the story with all the critics that coming along. I see it when they suddenly start to post stories on LinkedIn and there's a fuss in the organization. So it's sometimes very difficult. The way to manage that is to include the managers when you develop the messaging framework, when you develop what are the assets that you're going to talk about, what are the narratives, so people are included. And this is something HR knows how to do, to include other people in the process, but it's very important in order so they can see themselves at the outcome and support. I think it's also very difficult because it comes with a price, a budget. You really need, in order to do employer brand that someone notices, you need a budget. Now, there are two things that makes it hard. First, HR doesn't have the resources that marketing has. Now, employer brand is a lot about marketing, so that's a difficulty. Another one is it's kind of a new money because we didn't have this budget before. Do we need it now? So you must prove ROI. First, and it's very hard to prove ROI on employer brand in the first 6 months, 1 year. You can find some shortcuts when you do recruiting. You have more prospects, You have it takes maybe a little less time, but as I said, employer brand these days it's not mostly about recruiting. So you asked about what is difficult. Where I think that first it's difficult everywhere,
Yeah.
right? But each domain has its own difficulty because when you want to implement inside the organization, budget is not a big issue. The issue is
Mhm.
attention. Can you have attention of the leadership? Can you have attentions of the managers? Because everyone wants to make a workshop, right? It's very important. So what should we do it about? Maybe we should do it about how to implement AI newest
Mhm.
capabilities. You should. So you need to make a room in order to work with the managers, and that's also something that is not very easy to do.
Mhm. And my next questions for you is very interesting from my experience. Absolutely agree when we talk about the managers, what we need to include them. It's sometimes it's also it's about budget, but I also, from my experience, we have a situation where the people said, "Oh, employer brand. It's a responsibility of HR. Why should I visit these workshops? Why should I participate in focus groups? What should I implement in my life? It's a responsibility of HR." So my next question is why, what is the best way to sell the idea? What employer brand is the responsibility of the I think all of leaders of the organization. How to engage them in this process and make them our ambassadors. Different thing. Maybe could you share some experience? What helps you this way?
Sure. So that's also a difficulty. As we said, there's a lot of difficulties.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's a good thing because otherwise they wouldn't need humans like us, right? Machine can do everything. So the way I approach it, I have several things that I try and I see what works best. Okay. First, we show them what other companies are doing, right? Because we see other managers are being like presenters of the company. It is so important. It is so nobody can really develop a relationship with a company. You can develop a relationship with a leader. You say, hey, I would like to work with him. So there are leaders out there, they're doing the work, and I'm a little bit annoying and poking the look what they're doing. You're not doing that? Okay. So that's one way. The other way to do it, you can always find some managers that understand that in these days recruiting and employee branding, it's a company effort. It does not belong to HR because it happens everywhere. And then when you can find those 2 3 managers, you work with them and you do pilots with them and you show success has many forms, right? It can be like making them show up on job ads and showing how it makes people approach more, send their CVs, and improves the candidate pipeline. Or you can put them on stages, on meetups, on conferences, and people start to look and say, okay, I can understand better. And employees start to talk one to each other. So finding your cooperation within the managers, it's also a very good starting point. And of course, if C-level executives are on board, that's a key success indicator because you know, a company can say it is very important for us. We would like you to, but if they don't put people and budget on that issue, it's not really important. People understand that. They're not stupid. They work in the
Mhm.
organization and they understand. So, you know, as a consultant, when they invite me to meet a new company and see whether we can work together, one of the first things I try to understand is okay, I'm meeting with you in your office. Who else is with us on this? Who else cares? Who has a pain that the employer brand doesn't work very good and people are not as happy or the pipeline is not as good? Because what I've learned, if there's no pain, it will be very hard to do something significant. It will be very hard to do something that is not a marketing project, is an organizational development project. Because employer brand, and that's something I've learned also, after 3 or 4 years, it's not a marketing project. You have new language. You have a new way of introducing yourself as a company. Everyone needs to follow along. And that makes it something that is organizational and not some kind of aspect of a marketing campaign. And that's the way I approach this very difficult question you just showed to me, is how do you recruit the managers to be a part of that? And you know what? Another thing, you need to be passionate about it, right? I hope I can transform the passion I have for this subject. So, as a manager within the organization, if you're passionate about it, you will find an interesting way to storytell what is employer brand, how does it work for us, what is it good for us, and how it can influence the company. And it creates momentum, and it creates like a magnet that people want to be part of it. And that's, I think, the things that help us push employer brand into a manager's agenda.
Mhm. And I really appreciate when the managers of the company they understand why employer brand is important and what impact it has on the reputation on the company. But I want to ask you about another question. So absolutely agree with now we stop to watch to look at employer brand only as a marketing tool, only as a tool for recruitment because it's much more deep. And on the previous week, I published the article on LinkedIn. What and now we have a new reality and retention is much more important. It's a new recruitment way because it's not only to keep people inside the organization, but also about ambassadors program, about referral program. So for me, a next question about if we talk about employer brand, and not from a perspective of recruitment outside the organization, but from a perspective of retention, and I think inspiring our employees, engage them to be a part of the organization, or change of the organization. What should we do? On which part of the processes, maybe in which part of our communication we should focus if we talk about
Sure.
internal audience?
So, as a consultant, I would say for sure, first, you need to understand the organization, right? There's no one fit solution for every company. And the key for that is to understand where the company is dripping, right? What offerings the company has and that employees don't see or don't understand, right? I met companies, not very long time ago, that the company is a true success story. In the pharma business, they sell, they develop, and they sell, and the worldwide operation. And a question I love to ask in those roundtables is the company successful? And employees were, yeah, I think so. I'm not sure. So this is a gap that we must lean into, okay? Because there is a true potential of engaging employees, but something doesn't let them feel they're part of the success. Now, what we did with this specific client is that we shifted the success story to the employees. So if you see this the kind of medicine developed and shipped overseas, it's probably thanks to, okay, and big posters, and the employees are presenters, and suddenly they feel proud. So I think that what I'm trying to say, of course, this solution doesn't fit every company, but look for the gaps. In other companies, it might be, you sit with one round table. Yes, you have opportunities. Yes, you have development, and you sit with another round table. No, you don't. So the offering is not distributed equally within the company. So the key is to understand those gaps, because we have to be a little bit modest as employer brand leaders. Of course, we want to tell the company, you must have a very important mission to save the whales. You must have many opportunities for people to advance from within. That's very nice, but put it aside. You need to discover the gaps between what company has today and is not perceived in the employee's life, daily life cycle, and press on that because that's the advantages of the company as a product. Now, of course, in the long run, you can develop more things that will go inside and develop more plans, but that's we are looking for those gaps and how to make them lived experience.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Raz, my next question for you is it's about to say the truth when we talk about the company. I remember a time when more than 10, 15 years ago when I started work in this sphere in employer branding, the most part of the companies try to show themselves from the best side of them.
Yeah,
So, especially externally.
for sure.
But now we have situation what it's absolutely clear for everyone what's happened inside the organization. But it's a difficult moment for people to start to say the real truth about, for example, or overtime or about certain difficulties in our job. But it's important for the company, for outside, for attracting people who have a real expectation, and also outside, because the people really know in this reality, sometimes it's a really difficult reality. What could you recommend? What could you recommend for the companies who really to build a strong and attractive employer brand? But another way, I want to build authentic and real employer brand.
Sure. So first, I can recommend as much as I want. It's very hard for companies to tell the truth. Long hours. Yeah, it's a big effort. The stock is not very high right now, right? So it's hard. It's also as human beings, right? When you go to a bar, when you go to a party, only to your closest friends, you feel open enough to tell, I had a really bad day. I don't know what to do. My girlfriend left me, right? You don't spread it around also in social media. So my first thing I want to say, don't tell something that is not true. Okay? If you stick to the truth, you don't have to talk about the weaknesses. I will address it shortly because there is advantage to talk about the weaknesses, right? But you don't have to. You you can shift the conversation. The thing that happens between people, your weaknesses, people will talk about anyway. Weaknesses don't need PR, don't need marketing. We've been working long hours. Hey, they don't pay as much. You need to understand the advantages. You know that I meet some companies that are very they're not self-secure about their offerings. And look, you have 2,000 people working for you. You're doing something right. Let's find out what it is, right? And start talking about it. And they're also afraid to talk about the things that are going right because they will be very cynical. I have a newsflash for you. People will be cynical everywhere all the time. It's cross-cultural, right? Yeah, that's the way. Don't let that hold you back because what happens when you don't talk about the things that do happen? In some industries, the fact that you pay on time, that it's a clean environment, that managers don't shout on you. I'm sorry to say, but in some industries, it's an advantage. Talk about that. That's okay. That's your offering. Because what happens when you don't talk about the advantages, you don't let the 40% of employees that kind of like or they accept the deal to feel good about it because everybody all the time is so that's the first thing I want to say. Put the advantages out there. Don't be afraid. People will be cynical. So what? If you tell things that are not true, that will backfire on you. But if the things that you have and you have the research, don't invent them in the boardroom for sure. The other things that come in mind. Are you familiar with the most known job ads from the old days of Shackleton? Shackleton,
Yeah,
yes, right.
it's one of the famous advertising.
Ever, right? Because he went on an expedition, low, no, low wage, cold nights,
It's
not safe return, glory if you come back. And you will remember this ad today, and probably in every conference we see this. I also showed it
yeah.
in my conference, right? So there is a magnetic power in also telling the things that you are not. And that's okay because people appreciate it. And there's another thing I want to say that sometimes it's very hard for companies and HR leaders. Say who you are, say who you're not. It will beacon the right people to join you. Because if you are working in a certain domain, and that's the domain you work in. And if you want to tell a different story, like we use a lot of AI, which you don't, people will discover it shortly. So, or another thing that I heard very recently, with the COVID and other things, the work from home issue is also a big issue in Brazil, I presume.
Hmm.
Companies that offer flexible hours, company that don't. I say to leadership, look, you make your decision. If you think that for your kind of company, you want people to see each other every day because of the relationships, because of what you need to be doing, I don't judge you, but say that. Don't pretend something else, understand the price, and there's enough people that might think that that's a good offer for them because they don't like to work from home, because they love their relationship. Young generation, they're missing a lot if they work from home all day, because I made so many relationships and friendships, meeting colleagues in the workplace. So that's okay. Now, of course, if you facing the reality that people don't want to work for you, okay, so change the product. But otherwise, you believe in something, you say it. Easier said than done. We know that as a practitioners, but we try to push and to educate and to facilitate and do whatever we can because otherwise it's very generic. It's not interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah.
My next question is for it's about I want to ask you also, it's about differentiating. Now we talk about the cell truth, and now I remember what a lot of, I think 2 or 3 last universal research shows us what differentiation now is a really good challenge for a company. Because in the previous we was the but because we talk about not about reality but about our best part of try to be the better, and now we need to differentiate our brand from other brands
Yeah.
for employees, for other the people outside, and also it could be a reason to say at least it help us to find the reason for the candidate employees to answer the question, why do you want to work for us? Because
Sure.
it's very funny. Until the company fire this answer, they try to ask the candidates why do you want for us, but it's only the social oriented answer. So what could you recommend to the companies who really want to find this differentiation point and make this a selling point for the employees who answer, why do you work for these companies? And also for candidates, what should I work for these companies?
So I'm going to surprise you, right? I don't believe in differentiation, and I tell you why, and I tell you how what you can do. So if you're curious, stay along. I will tell you. First, listen. Company, I talk about employer assets. It's not endless, right? It's a mission, it's the people, it's the environment, it's the office, it's the salary, and 15 more, okay? There's our 20, 30 main offerings that company can make. And there's so many companies in the world, it's not like manufacturers of other merchants stuff that you can sell. So actual differentiation is very, very hard to prove and also to obtain. I put aside companies like, Elon Musk, he flies spaceships to the moon. Okay, you have 1 or 2 companies like that. So put them aside because most of companies no.
Mhm.
My second argument is most companies that stick to we want to be are companies that have done absolutely nothing in employer brand, and on day one they want to be different. Join the effort, begin your employer brand journey, move from being on one to being a five to being a seven, and then let's think, curb your enthusiasm. After saying that, the way that me and my team address this issue is not by the message, by tone and style, by creative, by how does it feel, okay? Because there are so many stories you can tell, right? You can tell a story about the mission, you can tell a story about the culture, you can tell a story about tech. There are so many stories that companies put as the main story. The differentiation comes from the creative that is noticeable. A company I work with is called 888, and we call them the eightsters. Now it's a culture story, okay? Many companies have this kind of culture story, but the differentiation was that in the creative we took the eight and put it, like this. On every advertising, they had these eight like superheroes, and it was very much recognized as their language. So the differentiation came from the creative, but culture story, has many. So that's my take on differentiation. First, it doesn't exist, but if you want it, let's be brave on the creative and make people feel something about you and remember you, because that's the issue. When someone applies to a job, here's a newsflash for CEOs: he doesn't apply just for your company. He applies to many companies. Now the contest is, who will he remember? Which company will he wait 3 more days or even a week to give to the offering? Which company will he be willing to get 10% less compensation, but he will choose to come? P.S. This is the power of employer brands. Not like consumer brand when you want to pay more for a product. In employer brand, you are willing to earn a little bit less in order to work for this company. So that's the actual contest, and this is where we're trying to help companies, and of course make employees proud. Hey, I'm an eightster. Look at me, right? So that's the journey.
Yeah. I agree with you, and I really like to talk about creation, because it's also the way for understanding you better. And I remember, like, on one conference, it told people who work in employer branding, people should not be just not a teller of the stories, but creator of the stories inside the organization.
Amazing. That's the best.
Raz, the time is coming so fast, and I have my last question. It's questions which I usually use for all my guests in the end of conversations, because we have mentioned a lot of important things during a conversation. And my last questions for you is based on our discussion. What three main tips could you give to the companies who want to build a strong employer brand? What should they focus on? Three main
You
tips.
have to start bottom up. Really, really, really understand your company through your employees' eyes and voices. There's all other ways. They are not. You cannot work with them for the long time. They don't have. You cannot reinforce them. That's the first thing. The second thing, employer brand is not an HR thing. If it's an HR thing, you're actually not doing employer brand. You're doing some kind of a campaign, some kind of an initiative. If you cannot create some kind of a committee which has other C-levels, executives, managers that are your main customers within the company, you're not doing employer brand, because you cannot control experiences around and within the company. And if I have to choose, the third one is, don't wait for the perfect EVP, for the perfect creative, for the perfect social post. How much time companies waste? The main thing, and I just had this conversation with a really client that I really love. And sometimes, when you're on LinkedIn, you see what other companies doing, you get jealous. And I tell her, listen, that's okay. Don't worry about that. What we need to see that we are better today than we were last week. If that's true, we're on the right path. And that's my tip for employer brand managers and people who want to manage employer brand within companies, because we know it's not only employer brand managers. See that you're always improving and moving forward, and that's the most important thing. Yeah.
Raz, thanks a lot for participation in our podcast.
Thank you very much.
So this is podcast Happy at Work. My name is Tatiana Cohen. Stay connected.